They're all messed up. All messed up.
You wouldn't give her that flower, would you?
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
That is sweet. Mint in box.
The last time I've seen that was at FYE back in like the 2000s and wanting it and hoping that the sphere did not come to life when opened.
Suck your brains out.
That's why I haven't opened it.
That's a smart move. Somebody got you the Hellraiser cube too. Wonderful friend.
Yes. Yeah,
And I always
yeah.
wondered if you play with that when you need a fidget spinner or something. And I was like, I wouldn't.
I do.
You do?
I do.
Ugh.
Fuck it.
Fuck
It'll
it.
just get me there quicker.
Yeah, there
Were
you go.
Were you invited to other dimensions of pleasure and pain?
I didn't get the pleasure one.
You know, I never picked up on that S&M vibe from Hellraiser. When they did the remake, though, it's very there. You're definitely in an S&M dungeon. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read the book yet, but I'm curious to see how the original interpretation of Pinhead and the Cenobites are compared to the movie. Because I know Clive Barker, he wrote the Hellbound Heart, and he also wrote the first movie, but
Yeah.
they both differentiate. Pinhead being the first one, of being like a little boy with a woman's voice in the short story, but
Right.
then in the movie it's played by the great Doug Bradley. Definitely
Ah.
two differences there.
Yeah, big differences. But
I
we're
mean-
not doing Hellraiser tonight, right?
Give it a few months, there'll be a remake
That's true.
Right.
with Bill Skarsgård.
Yeah, we have some bitching to do about him. He just made the credits in yet another film. But yeah, tonight we're talking about Phantasm, the original Phantasm, which came out in which year? Go, guys.
1979.
Ooh, Ryan coming across the finish line first. Yeah, 79. And if you couldn't tell by the haircuts, you can definitely tell by looking at the box. But this is Phantasm. I've been pumped. This is the one that I've been looking forward to the most because Phantasm was a mainstay in the horror scene for people who had like 12 channels, like I did for most of my life as a kid anyway. Phantasm was one of the movies that I saw a bunch of times, and it was scary, legitimately scary for a child of like 7 or 8 years old.
It's the sphere. The spheres is what gets you, especially like I remember watching it on Sci-Fi and just seeing the little ball just float around and like the spikes coming out and drilling in your head. It's
Yeah.
the whole tunneler thing from Puppet Head. It's like it's the drilling.
Yeah, the drilling
Yeah.
messes with you. First, I think that you're right about that. John, did you find it scary?
Yeah, but I didn't really appreciate it until I was older.
Same.
And
I can see that.
for me, the sphere wasn't the scariest part all along. It's Angus. Angus Scrim it can be a genuinely terrifying dude.
I mean, they hit gold casting him. And how tall is he in real life? 6'4"?
He was 6'4". Yep, 6'4".
Yep.
That was a good guess. 6'4". So like, we have a bunch of people we work with that are about that height, give or take 6'2" to 6'4", but at least 2 people who've been in my life somewhat recent, like every workday, that are 6'4", in recent memory. And it's not a terrifying height per se, like a daunting height, I'd say, but it's the skinny aspect of him and the hair and his facial expressions. It all combines into this awful thing. Ugh.
And how he lurches over and he's just like, boy, it's unsettling.
Boy. Yeah, that
She
was
a
my
little bit too.
ringtone forever.
Amazing. But that hits you too. That almost paternal aspect to him, the grandfatherly sort of vibe he gives off.
Mhm.
It messes with me a bit. It's a bunch of things that come together. There's that sci-fi vibe, like you said, with the spheres. I think that's really where the true terror comes from because you can't get away from that. it's fast and it's got spikes and it's going for your skull.
Unless you have a shotgun like Jody does and blow it into pieces. But to go back on the tall man, I agree with that. Like he always reminded me of like that my grandfather on like my maternal side. Like, yeah, you don't fuck around. Like if you fuck around, he's gonna come after you. But as you get older, you get a different understanding of what the film is and who the characters are.
Yeah.
And the one thing about the tall man is what I've read a lot recently from doing the podcast is that he represents death. He's the
I mean, that
embodiment of death.
tracks.
And it's unique to see it like that, and that's one of the opinions from critics. There's a lot of opinions. It goes back to Don Coscarelli and his creation of Phantasm. It came from a dream, very
Mm,
pre Nightmare on Elm Street. Funny enough, like it just came from a dream of him getting chased by a sphere down a long hallway, and he was like, "This shit's gonna drill my head in," and then it just grew from there.
Hmm. Yeah,
that's
a
cool.
dream he had when he was 15.
Oh, that's cool too. I love that.
Yeah.
Nah, I write stories that I thought of when I was like when I was of that age, and I think that's cool as hell that that's where it came from for him.
So interesting to read his genesis of the whole sphere, like when they're making the movie, and how initially it was going to be like needles and poison that went into the person when it hit them. He's like,
Mhm.
no, that's not scary enough. I need something to be scarier. Like the needles and the poison is scary, but what it really does is way, way worse.
Yeah, scrambling and sucking out your brains.
Hmm.
Yucky. It's the blades on the end of that sucker too. Maybe I'm thinking of Phantasm 2 on this one. They kind of up the ante a bit with the set stuff, the props I mean,
Hmm.
but I remember the blades on that being really vicious.
Yeah, yeah. You really only get the one time in the first one. You don't get the full sphere.
Right. Not the full sphere experience. The first one holds up super well for how old it is. And I mean, I don't know. I like anything that kind of brings you into that dream fugue state where you're trying to figure out what's real and what's not. And it doesn't really, it's not that ambiguous, but it makes you think too. It's not a dumb premise at all, which is
Hmm.
nice. We've been watching some movies, and
Yeah, we
some of
have.
them, yeah, some of them are, a little bit more heady than others. And this one made me feel more like I was watching, I don't know, something on the level of like In the Mouth of Madness, where you've got to think about what's going on a bit more. And it
Hmm.
adds to the scare for me. As soon as I get in my own head, it gets scarier.
There's just so much layers, and it makes you question whether it is reality or if it is fake. And it
Right.
keeps interweaving. And that's how he wrote it. It's like a lot of improv went into this film, funny enough. It was like, here's the direction, but do what you feel is right for this scene and for this character. And you see that throughout the entire film, and it works to its fullest potential.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things that I noticed and I enjoyed a little bit too was the name. If you do you guys know where Phantasm comes from? Or at least I think it comes from here. I could be wrong. But it's a Lovecraft word. It may
Yeah, it
be
is. Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, he may have invented it. I'm not sure, but I think he may have invented it. And for the listeners, basically it means state of being demented essentially, where you're not able to understand what's real and what's not. It's very Lovecraftian, right? In essence. And I think it's super cool that he named the movie that as well.
Hmm.
I mean, this onion's got layers. So let's start peeling them back. First off, let's go to the creator of the movie,
Don Coscarelli.
Don Coscarelli. He's a badass dude.
Yeah, he's really nice dude too.
You
Of course,
met
Real
him?
John's
nice
met him.
dude.
Of course, John's met him.
Yeah, yeah. I met him at a screening of John Dies at the End at Alamo Drafthouse, probably like
No
10 years ago
fucking
now.
way, bro. We're not
That's
Yeah,
editing
cool.
out
yeah.
that F bomb either. That stays. Are you kidding me? Down in Yonkers, he was there?
Yep, yep.
That's the one that I go to.
He and the founder of Alamo were down there for the screening, and just like we stood in the lobby of that place for a good 15 minutes just talking to him about John Dies at the End, because
Mm.
that's what we were there for. And I had read the book and I had so many questions because if you ever read John Dies at the End, and I highly, highly recommend it, you will have no concept of how that movie could have been made based on that book,
Yeah.
especially with the budget they were going to give it. Like $100 million budget, you could have pulled off the whole book. And he's just like talking about how tough it was to make decisions to cut stuff. It just would have been unfilmable.
Right.
But the stuff he managed to keep in it is just brilliant. And I think we've talked about the meat monster.
Yes, we have.
I think so.
Which is one of my favorite horror villains. But yeah, just such a nice dude.
Well, they got the right guy. If you're gonna make an epic masterpiece with, a short budget, he's your man.
Mhm.
Phantasm, I think, was 11 million and change.
Probably not even.
$300,000
Oh no,
was
it
the supposed
made
budget.
11 million and change.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
So 300,000 to make it, and then they made about, let's say, 12 million just for fun.
mhm.
That's
And
pretty good.
yeah, it's his third movie. He's still got like his mom is still doing like costumes and makeup for him.
That's so cool.
He had already worked with Angus. He had already worked with Reggie Bannister. So like it was really like a family production still.
Yeah.
He's also 24, 25 years old when he's
Right.
making
He's a
this movie,
kid.
which is
He's a
insane
kid.
too.
Yeah, you could get away with letting a genius in the door back then at a young age. Now everybody's got to prove themselves 45 times over before they get the check. But Angus was a theater actor, wasn't he? Before
Angus.
As we're kind of going away from Don real quick to talk about Angus.
I mean, we're gonna have a ton of time to talk about both of them over the course of 5 movies.
That's true.
So I'm definitely holding stories for the future, but I just want to point out, number one, Angus has a Grammy.
Yeah.
Not an Academy Award. He has a Grammy for writing liner notes.
I did read that in the show notes.
That's just amazing. But like, he did the liner notes for a Beatles album. He did them, so many of them. And then for like hold on, I have it. For Corn Gold, the classic Eric Wolfgang Corn Gold. His liner notes are Grammy winning. Yep.
Oh, that's funny. The statue looks the same no matter what, so that's pretty funny. That's cool. And now line notes, let's pretend that it's 2025 and everybody just uses Spotify. What are line notes, guys?
Oh, liner notes were one of the coolest parts of getting an album. You'd have, depending how extensive it was, you'd have like biographies and stories about the music. You get some lyrics in there. You get credits and thank yous. But like on like those big collections, like that Corn Gold one would have been, there's essays in the liner notes.
That's
Like,
cool.
it's just so cool. I think I want to get my hands on that.
That's like an homage to back in the day, kids, when you were driving home from the video game store or something, and all you could do was open up the package and pull out the manual and start going through that. It's like the equivalent of that, but for a music album, a vinyl album, going through the liner notes. That's beyond me. I think 8-tracks were still around when I was in diapers and stuff, but we weren't a cultured family. We didn't have vinyl records in the house, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, we did.
We're a cassette
Tons
family.
Tons.
So Angus got liner notes, Grammy. Back to Don. So Don gets this. He pulls it off. It's really well received. I saw something about eventually. Okay.
Eventually. So they did a test screening before the movie was done, and it was a disaster. So it didn't have the effects. It didn't have the full score.
Okay.
But it was just like, let's test this out and see how people are feeling. And like he wrote in his memoir, just walking out and overhearing people saying it was horrible, it was terrible, and just like that would wreck a person.
Yeah,
And
it would
instead
wreck me.
Just dug right back into doing it until he had a finished product that was then a hit. Like it was this Phantasm was the second biggest horror movie of the summer of 1979.
What was the first?
Alien.
Oh my God! The name of the podcast, you dummy. What are you doing, Kearns? Yeah, Alien would. Well, I mean, it's gonna be tough to beat Alien.
Yeah.
And I would talk about two very spiritually unique films compared to one another as well,
Right.
respectively. Yeah. So, do you think he made a ton of changes after that screening, or do you think it was just an unfinished product and he just dug back in to get it done?
It sounds like the way he writes it, it was mostly an unfinished project at that point, and he just went and got the score done, figured out the effects because this sphere was a big problem. Trying to get it to move because they couldn't do it on wires because it didn't look good.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, what they discovered is one of the guys that worked on the film had a pretty good throwing arm. So he threw it, and then they reverse filmed it.
Oh, sweet.
Smart.
Yeah.
That's cool. And that makes sense
Yeah.
with why it darts so perfectly. And that's what's scary about it. It looks like it's flying
Yeah.
because it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Some dude's just throwing it as hard as he can.
That's cool. Man, though, God, that had to be hard on that prop. It's supposed to be like shiny. There's no blemishes on it. That's tricky.
Yeah.
It shows he was ahead of his time, Coscarelli, because like to think of all these little nuances, like just throwing the sphere in the air without strings, and like to go back and not to get frustrated, because I mean at this time there was a lot of filmmakers growing, especially in the horror genre, and he kept fighting for his dream, which is in Hollywood that's what you have to keep on doing, of course, is keep fighting. And I think this is like he had like several endings. I don't know which ending was in the original screening, but I know the one of the endings wind up in Phantasm 4, which we'll talk more once we get to Phantasm 4, of course. And not to have the score, I'm shocked that the score wasn't included because that's really important in Phantasm. The music really gives it that edge.
The way he writes it in his memoir, he didn't even have a guy hired to do the score yet.
That might have helped. Seeing some of the footage and stuff ahead of time might have helped with composing the score. But that's a white knuckle ride to go into it without the music figured out.
And then just getting the distribution. Like, so you finally get this completed project. At first, the only company that was interested in it was New Line. And they were pretty much brand new, and he knew nothing about them. But he was probably going to go that way until Avco Embassy jumped in, and he didn't realize they were broke at the time too. But that they were released The Graduate, so like that's legit movie studio. That's legit company.
Right.
Imagine if New Line Cinema picked up Phantasm way before Nightmare on Elm Street, how the whole industry might have been different. And I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street is very, in its own way, inspired by Phantasm, with that whole layer of dreams, like what's real, what's fantasy. And there's a lot of movies that borrow from Phantasm, which makes it like one of the greatest horror films to ever be created. But just like that whole landscape, just thinking about it, how everything could have been like so different.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a transformative movie for the industry. Absolutely.
And I mean, the thing Avco also had over New Line at that point was the contacts and the ability to market a movie and get him on TV and get the movie out there to people. They sent Angus and Coscarelli on like a multi-month media blitz
Hmm.
that like winds up with Don Coscarelli going on the Tomorrow Show, which was hosted by Tom Snyder, with George Romero. He's sitting in the green room to go out there with George Romero, who's taping Dawn of the Dead. They get
wild.
that collision of classic horror right there.
How do you not wilt? Well, I bet you he didn't realize he belonged in the room with him at the time either.
Oh,
Probably thought he
not at
was.
all. Like,
Yeah.
not at all. He talks about like how nervous he was to be going on that because that was also a pretty huge show at that point in time. But how nervous and anxious he was, and he's just sitting in there with George Romero, and George Romero's just like cracking jokes and like just put him completely at ease.
Good.
And they went out and had a great conversation.
See, it's worth it to meet your mentor or heroes, in the industry. Sometimes it's like shitty, but in that case, that was awesome. But George A. Romero was a different cat, especially during that time. They were all different cats.
Adam Green has a similar story that he told. I think he told it at the surprise release of Hatchet 4, because when he made Hatchet 4, no one knew it was coming. And he had this story about it. Was right after Romero died too, and it was just this story about how he was done. He didn't know what he wanted to do. He was like sort of stuck, and Romero re-inspired him and helped him find a new vision for stuff.
That's
And
cool.
I think that's just who George was.
This guy loves the craft, wants to foster more of it.
Hmm.
I want to switch gears here for a second. We
All
we
right.
tend to dive into the deep end with a rock, and we stay down there for a while. But one thing we always forget to do at 22 minutes in, 23 minutes in now, might as well get it out of the way. Let's go do a brief synopsis of what Phantasm is as a film. Like, what's the story?
So with Phantasm, it starts off with Jody and Reggie attending their friend's funeral, Tommy, who gets murdered in the beginning by the lady in lavender. And Jody's really keeping his brother Mike away from it, from funerals and everything, because of the death of their parents. And as Mike's like watching everything occur, he notices some weird occurrences. The tall man lifting a casket into the hearse by himself, hooded figures, which I like to call the evil Jawas. They're just roaming, they're just roaming around, and it gets into a whole deeper thing of like science fiction, slavery in its own way. We find out like the evil Jawas are like slaves in on this planet. I know I do the little head bopping thing because they look like Jawas. Like they're just
Mhm.
like I'm expecting R2D2 C3PO to show up, but it's all intergalactic, and the tall man wants their souls in his way and like their whole embodiment in order to create these little slaves.
You definitely learn more about them, the little guys, in the later movies.
The not
But
Jawas.
I did look it up. They do have a name.
What are they?
So they're gravers, and they're also
Oh,
dwarf lurkers.
okay. Both of those are pretty cool.
Yeah.
Dwarf lurkers and gravers. Yeah, it's pretty solid.
Better than hooded figures, as according to the first film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
suppose.
it's almost like he knew this was gonna be a whole bunch of more movies.
Seems so. I also looked into because they are Jawa-esque, and George Lucas is a little bitch when it comes to suing people. So, and he was very covetous of the whole Jawa vibe. I think he went after somebody who was doing like a stage show that had, and I assuming they actually stole the Jawas, but Star Wars was still in production when Phantasm hit theaters, so George Lucas couldn't do shit. But I do wonder, they're very similar. I do wonder if he happened to pop into the other set for a minute.
Mhm.
If a Jawa walked by with a cup of coffee and a cigarette one day, and he was like, "Oh, that'd be perfect." I doubt he was filming it at a big Hollywood studio alongside Star Wars, though.
I forget. I think he got a little bit of it in an actual studio, but that might have been two.
Could have been. Two is you can tell that there's a huge difference between the production value of one and two. Not
Hmm.
that makes it sound. See, that's a weird way to say it, though. You can see that there's more expensive cameras being used,
Yeah,
and there's more money in two. But
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with the production value of number one. I think number
not at
one,
all.
yeah, I think number one shines a little bit brighter in some ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's just pure love of the craft.
It's that low budget feeling. It was filmed in the San Fernando Valley in California. So the first one wasn't filmed in a studio. The rest were filmed in studios, of course. So you guys nailed it on the head on there. They filmed on weekends, 20 plus hours, Saturday, Sunday, worked scene by scene. As I said, it was improvised. It was like that college low budget vibe weekend film shoot. And that's what you live for. It's that whole Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino in the early 90s. It was just occurring in the 70s and it occurred previously, George A. Romero, Night of the Living Dead. That low budget filmmaking that nails like what society is at that time right on the head and brings audiences to view and love.
Yeah, it's wild to think about how close in time that was to Night of the Living Dead too. 11 years.
And then it was like 2 years from Dawn of the Dead, right?
I mean, they were doing press at the same time.
Okay.
So I could, yeah, it's a year. I think Dawn was 78.
Wow.
Imagine going to see a double feature at a drive-in, like opening up with Phantasm and then leading into Dawn of the Dead. Like, that's cool.
That would be insane. This is how shitty our era was with horror movies. I went to a drive-in once. Halloween H2O was part of the double feature. Halloween H2O. I believe there's a rapper in that film. Isn't that Busta Rhymes?
That's
Busta
Resurrection.
Rhymes.
LL Cool J is in 20 years later.
Yeah,
as
LL
he
Cool
reads,
J is in H2O.
Oh, it's LL Cool J?
he reads the sex novels to his girlfriend. He's like, I'm going to write this great novel. Listen to this. And she's like, it's so campy.
My God. Deep
He's
Blue
like, it's
Sea,
the best thing. Oh,
Halloween.
God.
That was LL Cool J. Are you sure?
Yep, 20
What was
years
Busta
later.
Rhymes?
H2O, yep.
Busta
Yep.
Rhymes was in
Resurrection.
Resurrection.
Busta Rhymes was in the reality show one.
Oh my God. That's right.
That looked good on paper.
Write that on my memory.
That was at the time of like fear.com and all
Yeah.
that. They were like, we
That-
have to do something with Michael.
No,
I mean,
couldn't
no
handle it.
fear.com fans?
No, you didn't.
No, I did not like it.
No,
I did not
I
like it.
prefer. If we're gonna go that route, I prefer Strangeland.
That's a better choice.
I never saw
10 times a
Strangeland.
better choice.
It's a better choice. It's still not great, but it's a better choice. D. Snyder as a killer is amazing.
I bet it is. All right. Let's circle back to characters. So we've heard some main protagonists, some kids. We heard about Angus, the tall man, in the film, and he's the scary besides the Gravers. And then there's our boy. Let's talk about Reggie.
I love
Let's
Reggie.
talk about Reggie, baby. Yeah, who's Reggie in this movie?
So Reggie is the brother's friend. He also drives an ice cream truck and plays the guitar.
I never met a dude
And-
who drove an ice cream truck that I didn't think was selling drugs out of it, to be honest with you.
Reggie was absolutely dealing out of the ice cream truck.
He was smoking his own
But-
supply.
Yeah, that too.
Maybe it's the premature baldness, but Reggie looks 45.
Easily.
Jody looks 25.
Yeah. It's well, it looks like somebody's uncle, like his uncle or something like that is
Mhm.
coming through to try to help him out. When I was a kid, that's what I thought was going on. Because he looks crazy middle-aged, but he says ridiculous things.
Oh my gosh.
He's got lines.
And like, it's hard to imagine that going forward, he and the tall man are going to be the most consistent presence in this franchise.
Yeah, that's true too. That's interesting because they change out the lead actor between Phantasm 1 and 2, which is an interesting thing to do. And the reasoning why, I think when I was reading it, the reason why was just that the young buck from the first movie, I don't even remember his name, couldn't handle.
Michael
They didn't think
Baldwin.
he could handle the weight of carrying what was going to be a franchise, Michael Baldwin. They
Mhm.
needed a bigger
But then
guy.
I believe he circles back like in 4 or 5. I think
Yeah.
he's back.
3?
Or is
goes
it
back
that
in
soon?
3. Mm-hmm.
He comes back as the same character.
Yep. He comes
Yeah.
back as Mike. And I want to say Jody comes back because they skip out on Jody in the second one. And then he comes
Jody's
back, I think, for
at
the
some
third one
point,
too.
yeah.
Yeah. The fifth one is
Well, they
very
sort of
like.
leave it with him dead.
And that's
Oh,
where
yeah.
they go with that whole questioning of like, is it a dream or is it real? Because right before I'm
Mhm.
talking about that scene, right before that scene, Reggie is killed by the lady in lavender / the tall man. He gets stabbed, and then he's like, "But Mike, Jody's been dead for 2 weeks," and right by the fire with his red sweater, and he's like, "It's okay. We'll go on a trip in my truck." Just pack your bags. It's so wholesome, but at the same time, it's like, what the fuck did I just watch in like this hour and a half? Was it a dream? Was it fake? Was it a reality? Is he my uncle? Is he a friend? Is
I
he a
have a weird
teenager?
memory of Reggie at the end of it where it's like you figure out they're at the end of the movie and Reggie turns out to be an antagonistic style guy and it like cuts. Now I'm not sure if that actually happened or if I just actually had my own nightmare and that's what happened in it. But I think I remember the scene where they're like leaving, like they won the day or whatever it was, Phantasm 3, whatever it is. And then Reggie turns around and he's got like half of his face missing or his skull, like his scalp's hanging off. And there's like a jump scare kind of ending where you're like, oh, he's not safe at all. That kind of thing.
I'm jumping on the train with you. I want to say that's either 2 or 3. I might be. I want to jump on that train with you because I remember that.
It's like vague memory in my head. Well, when we're rewatching it, we'll figure it out. But Reggie, well, first off, you've referenced Lady in Lavender twice. Who's that?
Angus Scrim and drag, and really good drag.
We got a little Norman Bates thing going on here. Normie.
It's more of his supernatural abilities. Is he's able to present himself as this gorgeous, busty blonde who's willing to hook up with people, and that's how they get their friend at the beginning, Tommy. And they almost get Jody that way, and then they get Reggie that way.
I mean, Reggie was doomed to fall into that trap, that honey pot for first walked out of the set. They knew what they were doing with Reggie. Poor guy.
This chick loves my widow's peak. Let's do it. All right.
I kind of think she could have gotten any one of us too.
Oh yeah.
No doubt.
Listen, she wasn't ugly.
She is not unpleasant to look at.
Exactly. We got to do a Where Are They Now and see what she looks like today. See if she can still bag Reggie. But knowing that it's Angus takes a little off the top. You know what I mean? It's a little grosser.
Is it after the lightning flashes and he's got that scowl on his face as the knife's like digging into his victim?
Or at least I would rather it end there rather than getting further along, if you catch my drift.
Oh,
yeah.
Tommy got the whole vibe.
The whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He's like, this is the greatest sex I've ever had. And stabbed to death. Jody's almost there until like Mike runs across the field after getting chased by the evil Jawa. And he's like, that's my brother. I gotta go.
So Lady in Lavender is not another character. It's just Angus in magical drag. Got it, guys. All right. So the first movie, you're continuously kind of pulled. Actually, it's not that veiled. He's when he's dreaming, and you're kind of aware of it. When he's not, you're kind of aware of it. I don't think the first one does a very good job of sort of trying to confuse you between the two. What do you guys think?
No, and I don't think he's necessarily really trying to confuse you until the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, that tracks.
Agreed.
And it does get confusing in the last 5 minutes. I don't necessarily think we should even talk about the direct ending of the film. If there might be a lot of people out there that haven't watched Phantasm.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to spoil that because it's such a good twist.
You've had 46 years,
but it's not. It's somewhat obscure as far as. I mean, there's tons of people that haven't watched Dawn of the Dead and things like that too. But I feel like they have a much better chance of having seen that than Phantasm. Phantasm was a bit niche. I mean, they threw the whole franchise up for us to watch 8:00 movies and things like that all the time. HBO, I think, played it all the time too. But
Sci-Fi.
HBO loved Don Coscarelli movies.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Beastmaster.
Yeah, HBO. Hey, Beastmaster's on.
That's funny. Well, I didn't have a ton of licensed material back when home box office first launched, right?
No.
No.
No originals.
No, no. They were just like your first cable service, really.
They re-showed heavy metal a lot.
Yes, that was cool. Edgy.
Yes.
The Nude Bomb. The Nude Bomb was on almost every day.
Yeah,
The
they
Get
went
Smart
sex.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which,
They-
by the way, for a movie called Nude Bomb, there is a shocking lack of nudity.
I was just about to make the point that they did, like, with heavy metal and stuff, they went for sort of like, you're not gonna see this on regular cable kind of thing.
Mhm.
But, yeah, Nude Bomb, if as you're referencing it, I guess is very prude bomb.
Yeah.
We can ruin
Good way
the
to put
ending.
it.
It's your barbecue, Cyrus, and it smells
Nah,
good.
let's not ruin the ending. I mean, I kind of already did, but let's
A
not
little bit.
really harp on ruining the ending.
All right, cool.
One of the things that I hadn't noticed until watching it this time, at no point do they attempt to get help.
Yeah, that's true. Very
It's just the
true.
three of us. We're not going to the cops. We're not going to bring other friends in. They sort of accidentally involve those two girls, but they
Oh.
don't bring nothing. The three of us, this little boy and this bald ice cream man and Jody can save this. We can do it.
Yeah, and they do. They do. Can we
Yeah.
talk about the gun? Can we talk about one of the instruments of mass destruction in this movie? Or is this am I thinking Phantasm too, where we get the 4-barrel shotgun?
I think that's the second one.
That
Yeah.
is the second one. Yeah, I jumped the gun, but
We only get the single shot.
Reggie gets, yeah, it's true too. Reggie gets into a vibe that I wanted to kind of touch on before we get into your top fives, and it's a chicken and the egg thing. He's very Ash from Evil Dead. I believe we have a chainsaw, we have a boomstick. He's that guy, and he's got some catchphrases too.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is I was reading an article about what movies, which some of the movies listed as homages to Phantasm or took a lot of from Phantasm to include in their movies. Evil Dead wasn't on it, and that is a good connection because Reggie is pre-Ash.
It feels like he's very Ash-like. I don't want to take anything away from the character Ash, the Evil Dead franchise. I don't want to imply anything or say it's a bad thing. It's a good thing, no matter how you look at it. But Reggie does feel like Ash, less cool
Yeah.
Ash.
If they're listening to it, we'll have a Ash versus Reggie crossover. Bruce Campbell, please, if you're listening to us, Reggie Bannister, Don Coscarelli, come on.
Let's go. I think Don's gonna dust off the old script and get out there against Evil Dead. I think he's tired.
If only Angus Scrimm was alive, him getting the book, the Necro Comic-Con, just in his hands and just
That's going in the dictionary.
Yeah, it's
I
got to
know, I
go in the
messed it up.
dictionary. Oh, Jesus. John and I even looked at each other. We tried to hold it together on that one. That was a good one though. That's a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
If he does get his hands on that,
It'd be chaos with those deadites and spheres.
yeah, that's the thing.
Yep.
That's the thing. What's gonna win the day?
So since you brought Angus back up, I have another Angus story I found.
Okay.
So at some point in the 90s, the British Encyclopedia of Horror comes out, and it's like little sketches of all the stories of horror actors and icons, and in it they refer to Angus as a minor American horror icon.
Oh.
But here's Angus at Angus best. He wrote them. And the quote from the letter is, "I'm so grateful to be listed at all. And I realize at my age I'm not apt to attain the record of Boris Karloff or a Bela Lugosi. But if I manage before my end to make another 2 or 3 significant horror films, do you think I might be up to a middling horror icon?"
That's pretty good.
I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, that's a great way to sass. That's good stuff.
Hmm.
Reminds me of like reading letters by Hunter Thompson and things like that when he was writing other amazing writers and had no problem just laying into them and things like that. No fear. That's a cool way to do it, Angus. I like it. So that's pretty much Phantasm 1. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about from the movie before we roll into your top fives?
The other thing that sort of gets me on more viewings is how many times they just hand the keys to a 10-year-old.
That was
Here,
the
Mike,
times.
drive the car.
Yep.
Drive the car. Drive the car.
That was the times. My
Like,
friend Mike would drive his dad's car at 12 years old from the house. It was only about an eighth of a mile, but from the house down to the shop that they had down 117
mhm.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
But like there's that scene where they're getting chased and Jody's out of a car and the CUDA comes up to him,
Mhm.
and as it's coming up, you can't see a driver. It's like, oh, now their own car is driving on its own. And he opens the door and there's Mike in the car, and you just can't see him over the dashboard.
Like that. That's good
Yeah.
stuff. No, that is good stuff. And that is a sign. That's a late 70s thing. Yeah, Daddy's had a
Mhm.
few too many. Why don't you drive home today, Jesse?
Yeah.
You just get over there. You need a brick? You need a brick for the pedal? And he's already asleep. The kid's like, let's
Mhm.
go. Jeez. God forbid it stick. He's going to be standing on the clutch. Kids
Mhm.
today don't understand that.
The bench seat all the way forward.
No seatbelts in sight.
Mhm.
Wild. No, that's a great point. That's something that when you watch this movie, guys, if you're out there and you should, you're gonna see the lighting. Everything screams late 70s, early 80s. The lighting is done. It's well done, but you can tell based on the grain of things too that it's just very much so of that era.
Yep.
I was gonna say the theme too. It's very simple, but it's very memorable, and it sticks throughout the whole film. Is to overcome fear, and it stems from when he goes to see the fortune teller, Mike, and he puts his hand in the box. It's that simple scare of his hand going in the box and something in there that shows that he has to overcome that, and it comes back later on, and actually throughout the entire film.
I
Um,
forgot about that. That's a freaky scene.
yeah,
Mhm.
with the fortune teller, is she blind? Do you think she's blind? Is she?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big trope.
Yeah.
Big trope that goes all the
Okay.
way back to Greek mythology. Sorry.
No, no, you're good.
I think she and her daughter are scamming him, but I think she's really blind.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, when the daughter goes into the mausoleum and she opens the door and she's sucked through the door and the screaming, you hear the sounds of a portal opening up. It's like, well, she didn't overcome her fear, but Mike will. Michael eventually will, and he does. I mean, him driving
Mhm.
the Barracuda against the hearse from that scene, him fighting basically the tall man going through the dead, the sphere. It's all builds up to him overcoming his fear.
That's what the
Mhm.
phantasm is. It's that delusion. It's the level of crazy that you can get to based on overwhelming fear. So that perfectly tracks with the title of the movie too.
Yep.
You drive yourself crazy. So Mike is able to get through it, which is it's a neat thing that Don pulled off with this movie, and it is a scary movie. I watching it, and Ryan mentioned it when we were talking about it yesterday, the day before too. It's ahead of its time, for sure.
And
Mhm.
it's a movie that will always give you like goosebumps, make you feel to like sit at the edge of your seat because you can watch it a million times, but it's that grittiness of the film, that 70s film.
Mhm.
And it's something you can't have nowadays because it was just the style, that old film reel of like it rolling and just catching the like the little blobs and stuff. Um, Watching it, I wanted to watch The Warriors right after it because it's that same style of like film with the pops and stuff. Like it's that grittiness. I two different films, of course, but it's like to see that aesthetic. It's a warm feeling from a person who loves film because now it's all modern and it's like clean. And even at the scariest parts, like, yeah, it's scary, but it's like you need that grittiness, and that's what Phantasm gives, that low budget grittiness.
In this day and age, that's sort of like the alternate worlds thing. When you watch a movie that pulled it off, that's 50 years old, 42 years old, and it does feel like you're getting pulled back into a different era, like we felt maybe when we watched Casablanca or something like that when we were kids. If you're younger now and you catch this one, it's just, and you get that same thing with we mentioned The Window, and things like that. The Birds is another one. It feels like you're pulled through a portal into a different world. This movie definitely holds that vibe. I love it.
So if I'm doing my math correctly, and I think I am, the time between Casablanca and Phantasm is less than the time between Phantasm and now.
I could see your face change when you came to that realization, and then I made the inference that that's what John just thought about, and it's going to make me sad. So, as I start my existential crisis, why don't we have Ryan start his top 5 for this week as we end out the episode?
So this week, my top five, after finding out that 10 years ago wasn't 1985 anymore, as tears of sadness come down, I picked top five movies similar to Phantasm, and I think you guys are gonna like them. To start with top five, I'm starting off with my boy David Cronenberg. Directed and written by him is Videodrome, starring James Woods, who's in one of my favorite vampire films, John Carpenter's Vampires.
Yeah,
Um,
he's fallen from a tall height, my James Woods.
I love it, a whole mess load of his movies.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's where I'll stop.
Yep. Jamestown was another one. Not Jamestown. What is it? Digstown is another one I like with him in it a lot. But that's not a horror movie. Anyway, Ryan was on number 4.
Number four is another David Cronenberg film, written and directed by him, Scanners.
Oh, nice.
It's in that vibe of Phantasm, that sci-fi horror, and it's like, yeah, it's gory and stuff, but that's what Phantasm was. It was like the reality, the fantasy, all mixed in one, given that sci-fi goodness with that horror gore. Number
Mhm.
three, you guys are, of course, talking about H.P. Lovecraft, Reanimator,
Okay.
starring Jeffrey Combs as Herbert Western, medical student who brings back, reanimates deceased bodies. I can't wait for us to cover that, especially one of the scenes. Floating heads is all I'm going to say on that part.
That was almost in my list.
Talking Heads, you mean? Like the musician?
Oh,
The
he was
song
a
he made?
talking head.
Yeah, he was a talking head. All right. All right. So you got
Ah,
that one.
house. Number two. So number two and number one were really hard to choose. So I number two, I went with Nightmare on Elm Street, directed and
Nice.
written by Wes Craven. I love Wes Craven. He's in the same category as John Carpenter. If I look upon them for anything screenwriting wise or filming, I go to them. But number one takes the cake, and we talked about it earlier, and that's Clive Barker's Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Um, all these films, they've have influences from Phantasm, based on that whole idea, that genre of sci-fi horror, and it really brings that idea to life, especially the idea of dream worlds and what's real
Yeah.
and what's not real. And the realization is sometimes you're not going to look for help. You're going to have to help yourself in order to take care of the antagonist in the film,
Hmm.
or films, I should say. But I'm kind of curious to know what your list is if Reanimator did not make it, John.
No, Reanimator didn't make it simply because it's kind of, I like to go a little less obvious. And it was like, okay, so my five is funeral homes, morgues, mortuaries, and horror movies.
Oh, I know one that you're gonna have on this one for
I don't
sure.
think you do, because I purposely left a couple off because they're like, we talked about them a lot. And, like, I
We did
left
talk about
Autopsy of
one.
Jane
This
Doe.
one. Yep.
I left Return of the Living Dead. I left Reanimator off. There's a whole bunch I left off just because, like, they're clearly the standards.
I love that your bag is so deep though that you could just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna take these 4 they're just too known and we've talked about them too much.
Well, this was such a struggle though, man. Like I could not come up with a list for days for this one, and
I'm glad. I'm glad this was hard for you.
all right. So number 5 from 1982, Mortuary.
Okay. Aptly named.
So a woman's investigating the death of her father, which she doesn't believe is accidental, which eventually leads her to a mortuary and a mysterious hooded figure. And we get some Bill Paxton in this one.
Game over, man. Game over.
Game over, man.
That was a good one.
My love, my
Yeah.
love for Bill Paxton and him in that movie makes me want to see it even more.
I'm so sad. I'm so sad we
Pretty
lost
good
Bill
one.
Paxton, man. All right, so Bill Paxton's in it. That's enough to get people to go and watch it.
So my number 4 is a movie called The Boneyard. So stop me if you've heard this one before. A cop, a psychic, a woman, and 2 coroners enter a building. You heard that joke before? No? Oh.
No? What does the hooker say?
The Prestige. The Aristocrat.
I wasn't expecting that to be the next 2 words out of your mouth. Okay.
So they enter a morgue to try to stop zombie children.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most messed up dogs in the history of movies. It's a white poodle. That's as far as I'm going to go. And it's with Mr. Roper, Norman Fell, and Phyllis Diller.
Oh, really?
Phyllis Diller's in this movie. If that doesn't sell you, I don't know.
That is a fucked up dog.
You already got me on Mr. Roper. All right, Mr. Roper, Phyllis Diller, and a fucked up poodle. Like, is it more fucked up than the one from Batman Returns? And I think that was just a dog forced to look like a poodle.
Yeah, that I hate poodles as it is.
It's pretty fucked up.
Phyllis Diller's the shit. I could just sit here and I hear her voice just looking at her picture.
The laughter.
All right, that's pretty cool. Yeah. All right, that dog can go to hell though. But all right, that's bony. Is it boneyard? That's boneyard.
Boneyard.
All right, the boneyard. Nice.
My number 3, we're gonna go to Portugal. Night
Very
Shift.
exotic.
Night Shifter.
Night Shifter.
Yep. So the night shift worker at a local morgue can talk to the dead. They
Oh, that
come
would
into
suck.
the morgue, and it's a pretty scary movie actually. Like it's got a nice creepy vibe to it.
Okay.
That was a Shudder movie for a while.
There was a kick for a while where there were like good ghost, bad ghost movies. I recall one where they had to like get them up into the attic and there's a bad one looming, coming to get them. I don't know what the hell that movie was, but I remember it messed me up. Had a cool vibe to it. So I imagine that this may be similar where he's like, hey, Frank, remember when you used to smoke 6.5 packs of cigarettes a day? You're like, oh, fuck you, kid.
Yeah, it's got some of that. It's got some of that.
Okay, good.
Definitely super creepy vibes, man.
Nice. And then the super creepies come out. All right.
Mm-hmm. My number 2 is, depending where you've seen it and what version of it you have, is Let Sleeping Corpses Lie or The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue.
Are these 2 working titles or you just had them tied?
Same movie. Just 2 separate titles. At some point I want to find out why. At some point I think it's a movie we should do too. It's British and it's cop chasing some people he suspects of a murder into a rural town.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the suspects that are doing the killing, it's zombies.
Oh, fucking zombies.
Nice pastoral British zombies, you know.
I was gonna say, like, are they super polite as they shamble about? Well, that's Canadian.
Yeah.
Shamble about.
Yeah. And it's, again, like, it's got a lot of Night of the Living Dead to it. It's got a lot of. It's gritty. It's kind of grimy. It's kind of. I like it. It's
Cool.
different from a lot that we've talked about.
Cool.
And my number one of my all-time favorite horror crushes is in it. Linnea Quigley. We go Night of the Demons.
Oh yeah. So this is the movie, listeners, that I had mixed up with Fright Night when we first started to plan this podcast. And then I went to watch Fright Night and I was looking for her because I remember her vividly. She literally like kickstarted puberty for me. And I was sorely disappointed for a little bit, just a little bit. And then Fright Night's amazing, so it's okay.
It's because you had a chicken head in place of that. That is why. You had Marcy Darcy.
Marcy Darcy, you're not hot. our YouTube short's a lie. So that's your number one, John?
That's my number one. Party at an abandoned funeral home goes south quickly when you bring in demons.
I mean, yeah, the quintessential party crashers.
Yeah.
They'll always piss in the punch
But
bowl.
you get that great scene at the beginning where they're in the store and Linnea Quigley's distracting the clerk by bending over and exposing herself and like.
That's classic for the times too.
Yep.
I didn't remember that scene until you just said it, but I think you may have ruined it by the way you said it. So that rewatch is safe now. But that's your baby, so you can say it however you want. That's awesome, man. Those were two great top fives. A lot of food for thought for me too. And I mean, we're in over an hour. I'm shocked, to be honest. If for the listeners, I held up production by about an hour and a half, a little bit longer than that actually tonight with technical difficulties. So I'm glad we managed to get this recorded for you.
Yeah, well, your technical difficulties managed to sort of quell my Death of Robin Hood rage.
Okay.
As we need Bill Skarsgård in another property.
Yeah, that's a big issue. Skarsgård's back. He's at it again.
You don't want to see him in tights singing. Come on now.
No, I want to see
Hugh
Defoe
Jackman
in tights singing in the labyrinth.
Hugh Jackman is Robin Hood in this movie, so it's already. I don't know.
So okay. I'm sorry. I got to go on a rant real quick. Hugh Jackman, you think of the sheriff of Nottingham. He's got the look, he's got the vibe, and then you hear Bill Skarsgård. You think, oh, little Robin Hood, little Carrie Elwes, little mustache, little goatee, what the fuck is he doing? Like werewolves,
I just
I'm
don't think
excited
Skarsgård
for.
could carry the role. I just don't think Skarsgård could carry the role, to be honest with you. What do you think? You think he could hold up Robin Hood?
I don't think he can hold up the sheriff. Alan Rickman is the best sheriff, all right?
Of all time. Of all time. Easily. I was very young watching that one too. It's so funny that you say that because I just saw the meme about Bryan Adams. That stupid fucking song had the entire country in a headlock. Everything I do
it for you.
I still can't get over Costner as a sex symbol. I get it from I get Richard Gere. I get some of the other ones that are kind of weird, but and I also not everybody's a traditionally handsome dude like the Hemsworths and whatnot, but Costner just seems so ugly to me.
He was
I don't know what it
untouchable.
is. He was literally untouchable.
Mhm.
Waterworld.
I mean, I've definitely enjoyed Kevin Costner.
I liked his acting.
Kevin Costner, can you make a movie that's not 3 hours?
Yeah, that would be nice too.
Like one, just one.
But no, I like him as an actor, although he can be kind of muted at times. But yeah, I think I like him as an actor a lot. I just can't figure out why anybody would ever want to fuck him.
Well, ask J-Lo. That's her next victim.
Way.
That is her next victim.
Costner right now?
So my mother-in-law came. She's like, "You need to listen to this, Ryan." I was like, "What's up, son?" She's like, "Kevin Costner and J-Lo." I went, "No, this is a farce right here." And there's rumblings. There's rumblings.
Just saw her at the Grammys though, and I can't imagine him dragging his wrinkly, salty body over top of that her Botoxed, fit toned self right now. I feel like that's probably one of the signs of the apocalypse. Just
it
so
is the
many
sign of
chemicals
apocalypse.
coming together. No, that can't be legal.
It's a demonic flubber.
It's a demonic flubber. Ugh, I'm gonna look into that too now after this to see what the hell's going on with J-Lo. But all right, guys, that's our episode on Phantasm. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we're gonna catch you next time with Phantasm 2. See you later.
See ya.